Hello and welcome to this tropical storm short summary. In this video, we are going to be looking at the 1950 hurricane season. Looking at all of the tracks from this season, as well as the chronology, both of these thanks to Wikipedia, we had a pretty active season, although albeit a slightly unusual one, with a total of 16 storms, 11 hurricanes, and 6 major hurricanes. These would cause a seasonal ACE this year of 211.3 within the top 10 Atlantic ACE records seasonally of all time so far. As we can see from our chronology, we had a very active from mid-August to mid-September, as well as an extremely active October. From every single storm in total, there would be 93 confirmed direct deaths. Some that we are going to be talking about here did cause non-direct deaths, and those will be listed as like a plus number on top of the confirmed. And the dollars in damage done totals 43.4 million 1950 US dollars in damage. Our first storm here is going to be Hurricane Baker. Baker first originated east of the Windward Islands, starting back on August 18th. Baker would become a tropical storm just the next day, and then a hurricane on August 21st. Baker would reach its first peak anywhere from 90 to 120 miles per hour. The data is not entirely accurate and is not so that there is no actual wind speed. It's just anywhere from the 90 to 120 is what I'm saying. And this would be over Antigua. In Antigua, I should say, hundreds of homes would be destroyed because of Baker. Baker would then degrade it back into a storm and even depression at multiple points while going over both the Dominican Republic and Cuba. Would then proceed to do a northward turn in the Gulf of Mexico, reaching its second peak, reaching around 110 miles per hour at a pressure of roughly 978 millibars. This pressure and wind speed was achieved on August 30th. Baker would then proceed to landfall on Gulf Shores, Alabama on the 31st as a close to minimal Category 1 hurricane. In total, I should say, I'm going to start with the totals here. 38 deaths were recorded and a total of 2.55 million US dollars in damage. Out of the 2.55, around anywhere from 2.3 all the way up to 2.5, so like 99% of the damage was crop related, and that crop related damage was done in both Alabama and Florida. The rest of the dollars in damage most likely coming from Antigua. Hurricane Dog is our next storm here, and it was detected as a Category 1 on August 30th. Dog would then proceed to become a major hurricane meaning Category 3 and above, on just the next day. Dog passed north of Antigua at 130 miles per hour and would proceed to devastate the island further on top of what Baker had already done less than 2 weeks ago at this point, on around the 30th or the 31st I should say, and this would leave thousands homeless. Baker would not go anywhere relatively near land for the rest of its life until becoming an extratropical storm. Baker would peak on, Dog, my mistake. Dog would peak on September 5th. Dog peaked at 145 miles per hour and kept those winds for around, I believe it was 18 hours, and had a minimum pressure of around 943 millibars. Dog also caused relatively heavy rainfall on New England, anywhere from 3, I believe, to 8 inches of rain, and this led to 5 indirect deaths on top of the 26 direct caused by dog. Dog also inflicted $3 million in damage. Easy is our next storm here, and as you can see, had a quite interesting path. But first, Easy developed into a storm on September 1st. Easy would become a hurricane just the next day, would do so 85 kilometers south of the Isle of Youth, the Isle of Youth being this relatively small island south of Jamaica. Easy would landfall on western Cuba at winds of 80 miles per hour. This would not stop it from intensifying further, as it would peak on September 4th and keep this peak of Category 3. So those winds reaching 120 miles per hour at a pressure of around 958 millibars, which is a little on the high side even for a minimum Category 3. Easy, as you can see on both of our maps here, would stall and then loop, not once actually, but twice, due to a ridge, also known as a high pressure, to its north. After this high pressure stopped bullying it, it would meander through Florida and then dissipate around the middle of the United States. But before that, Easy landfell on Cedar Key, Florida, with the winds of 120 miles per hour, so still at peak strength. Cedar Key would be extremely heavily damaged. Out of all of the homes in Cedar Key, half of them would be destroyed. Out of this half, 90% were damaged. Out of this 90%, anywhere from 40 all the way up to 60% of the homes were damaged beyond repair or inhabitable. So, families, people weren't able to return to their homes. Despite this odd track that Easy possesses, this was a very well-warned and tracked storm. At this point, hurricanes have a lot more data on them compared to tornadoes in 1950, simply because hurricanes are just bigger, affect a lot more people, and therefore are just a lot easier to record. And also, again, with them being so large, easier to track for the most part. So the effect that high pressures have on low pressures is well known with hurricanes at this point, for the most part. So again, leading to a very well-tracked storm. This would only cause Easy to inflict 2 non-direct deaths, as well as only 27 injuries. Easy would, although, cause $3.3 million in damage. Our last storm here is Hurricane King. King started off north of Honduras' coast on October 13th. King would take a while to become a hurricane, just thinking about it, that kind of deal. Would become a hurricane on October 16th. King would landfall west of Camagüey. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. This would be on Cuba, and at a wind speed of 90 miles per hour. This would, like Easy, not stop King from intensifying further. In fact, King peaked just before landfall around. In fact, King would directly impact Miami. Spoilers. So this peak was 130 miles per hour at a relatively high-ish pressure for a Category 4 of 955 millibars. This peak was achieved on October 18th. Spoilers, I already spoiled this. King would directly landfall and therefore impact on Miami. Miami is home to a Weather Bureau office at the time, is so now a National Weather Service office. the Weather Bureau would not be called by the NWS for would not be called the NWS for another 20 years actually. But in any case, the office was hit by the eastern eye wall, and this is seen down here in this black and white map. This dotted area in the middle of the two shaded areas is where the eye tracked, and on either side again we have those darker shaded areas. That is where the eye wall impacted. So it would be on the right hand side. The Weather Bureau office, that is. Just to Miami alone, King caused $15 million in damage and damaged 20,500 homes. King would continue to path straight through Florida, which caused widespread damage throughout, as you can imagine, the rest of Florida. King caused 11 direct deaths, as well as a total of 32 million US dollars in damage. This season is quite significant, other than the last bullet point here. The first thing is that this is the very first season that the NWS, I guess I should say NHC, very accurately recorded tropical storms, even down to depressions. It's like one of the first times that we're not seeing that we're probably not accounting for anywhere from 1 all the way up to like 5 storms every single year, as is what very commonly happened before the satellite era and before radar as well. But the most interesting thing that I noted at the first part is that this was an active season, albeit strange as well, and that is because we had absolutely zero activity until that mid-August point. And the chronology that I showed you at the very beginning, that is the very start of the activity. There was no storms of any kind before then. So that's just that little weird tidbit of all of a sudden just bam, active in August. This was also the very first season that the Weather Bureau used radar for the specific and purposeful intention to detect hurricanes off of the coast of the United States, and as well as territories of the United States as well, if they had a radar. And the radar went out as far as, I believe it was either 250 kilometers or 250 miles. I could be mistaken on the number alone, let alone the measurements of kilometers or miles. So I apologize if I'm wrong about that, which I most likely am. So again, sorry about that. Something very, very important here is that the 1950 season was the very first time that an official list of names was used for tropical storms. This, however, was the Army and Navy phonetical name list. So we had like Abel, Baker, Charlie, Dog, Easy, that sort of deal. But eventually we're going to get to actual names such as Camille and Katrina, and with this we see the end of the usage for the most part of the term Great Hurricane. There's like, the Great Miami Hurricane, the Great Galveston Hurricane, but instead, if a name isn't retired, for example, if Katrina wasn't retired, you could say, Hurricane Katrina of 2001, and Hurricane Katrina of 2006, rather than just, the Great North Carolina Hurricane or whatever. Neither of those storms exist, by the way. I'm just making up stuff to explain my point. We talked about the ACE earlier, that being 211. That is the 8th highest Atlantic ACE in recorded history so far. Granted, the 2023 hurricane season has not started yet. So obviously, hopefully, that doesn't have an ACE of 300. That would be very bad. I would not like to see that for the Atlantic. The Eastern Pacific has one. The Western Pacific has a lot, but none here in the Atlantic so far. Let's keep it that way. One of the last points here is that Hurricane Easy, is still to this day actually Florida's wettest tropical storm. Just near where it made landfall on Cedar Key, it dropped 45.2 inches of rain. Again, to this day, Florida's wettest tropical storm. Granted, I sure as hell hope that no other storm beats this, as Easy stalled just off the coast. And you don't necessarily want a hurricane necessarily stalling anywhere unless it's out in the dead middle of the ocean where it doesn't affect land. You wouldn't want a hurricane to be stalling right outside of Long Island's doorstep now, would you? I know I certainly wouldn't, even if I don't live there. And lastly, that last bullet point there is that every single storm here was very well forecasted and therefore very well warned and very well tracked as an ultimate result, which is the best thing about this season. Hurricane safety will only continue to improve from 1950 onwards, obviously, as, meteorologists are always trying to make strides in safety, as, weather safety is just a little important. But that is going to end this video on the 1950 hurricane season, a very, very notable one. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope that you also learned something as well. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you all so much for watching.